Our front door was gone. I stood there at nearly 10 o'clock at night, my 10-year-old daughter's hand trembling in mine, staring at the gaping black hole where our door should have been. The porch light illuminated nothing but emptiness. Our living room was exposed to the entire street. Anyone could have walked in. Anyone could be inside right now. My daughter's voice cracked as she whispered, "Daddy, where's our door?" And then the tears came. Not quiet tears. Kind of sobbing that shakes a child's entire body because she doesn't understand why the world suddenly became terrifying. I pushed her behind me, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and I stepped into my own home like I was entering a crime scene. Because that's exactly what it was. Someone had broken into our home and stolen our front door while we were at dinner, and taped to the wall where family photos used to hang was a handwritten note that made my blood turn to ice. Temporary removal due to HOA door color violation. You were notified. Door will be returned after compliance. That note was signed with the initials KM Karen Mitchell. The president of our homeowners association had hired someone to break into our property and physically remove our front door because she didn't like that it was painted blue. Not bright blue, not neon blue, a warm, deep navy blue that matched our shutters perfectly. She had declared war on my family over a paint color that wasn't even against any written rule, and now my daughter was crying so hard she could barely breathe, asking me if the bad people were going to come back, asking me if we were safe, asking me questions I couldn't answer because I was too busy shaking with a combination of fear and rage that I had never experienced before in my entire life. I need to tell you this story from the beginning because what happened that night was not the start of anything. It was the culmination of months of harassment, months of lies, months of a power-drunk woman making my family's life a living nightmare simply because we existed. This is the story of how one HOA president tried to destroy my family with fake allegations, illegal actions, and pure cruelty. And this is the story of how she lost everything when she finally went too far. My name is Ryan, and for 3 years before any of this happened, my family lived the quietest life imaginable in our little HOA community in suburban Arizona. We bought the house because it was perfect for us. 3 bedrooms, a nice backyard, good schools for our daughter, and neighbors who waved politely when you drove past. My wife Sarah works nights as a registered nurse at the regional hospital. She's the kind of person who comes home exhausted at 7 in the morning after spending 12 hours keeping people alive and still manages to smile and ask our daughter about her homework. Our daughter Mia was 10 years old when all of this started, and I need you to understand something about Mia. She is quite possibly the shyest child on the planet. She doesn't speak to strangers. She gets anxious about birthday parties. She clings to my hand in grocery stores and hides behind my leg when neighbors try to say hello. She has exactly 3 friends at school, and she's been friends with them since kindergarten because making new friends terrifies her. This is important because later in this story, you're going to hear about the lies that were spread about our family, and you need to understand that we were not troublemakers. We were not aggressive. We were not dangerous. We were a tired nurse, a software developer who works from home, and the most timid child you've ever met. We paid our dues on time. We kept our lawn mowed. We never had a single complaint filed against us in 3 years. We were, by every possible measure, model residents of this community. And then Karen Mitchell decided we were her enemy. I first encountered Karen about 4 months after we moved in, and at the time, I thought nothing of it. She knocked on our door one Saturday morning while Sarah was sleeping off a night shift and Mia was watching cartoons. Karen was in her mid-50s, with blonde hair that was clearly dyed and maintained with military precision, wearing a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest. She had a clipboard in her hands and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She introduced herself as the president of the Homeowners Association and said she was just doing a welcome walkthrough to make sure we understood the community standards. I thanked her for stopping by. I offered her a bottle of water. I answered her questions about our landscaping plans and our vehicle registration. She seemed pleasant enough, if a little intense about the proper placement of garbage cans. When she left, I forgot about her entirely. I had no way of knowing that during that 15-minute conversation, she was cataloguing everything about our home that she could potentially use against us later. I had no way of knowing that she had already decided she didn't like us, though I still to this day don't understand why. Maybe it was because I didn't seem impressed by her position. Maybe it was because our house was slightly larger than hers. Maybe it was because Sarah wasn't home to properly genuflect before the HOA throne. Whatever the reason, Karen Mitchell looked at my family and decided we were a problem that needed to be solved. For 2 years, nothing happened. We lived our lives. Sarah worked her shifts. Mia went to school and slowly, carefully made her 3 friends. I wrote code from my home office and joined video calls and lived the most boring existence a human being can live. We saw Karen occasionally at the community mailboxes or driving past in her white SUV, and she always gave us this look. Not a wave, not a smile. Just a look, like she was appraising livestock she was considering purchasing. I didn't think much of it. Some people are just cold. Some people take themselves too seriously. I figured Karen was one of those people, and I figured I would never have to deal with her in any meaningful way. I was catastrophically wrong. The war started because of a door. I need you to understand how absurd that sentence is. A door. A wooden rectangle designed to keep weather out and privacy in. We had lived in the house for 2.5 years, and the front door had always been the same boring tan color it was when we bought it. But the paint was peeling. The Arizona sun had done its work, and the door looked shabby. Sarah suggested we repaint it, and I agreed. We went to the hardware store, looked at colors, and Sarah fell in love with a deep navy blue. Not bright, not electric. The kind of blue that looks almost black in certain lights. A dignified, sophisticated blue that would match our slate gray shutters perfectly. We bought the paint. I spent a Saturday sanding and priming and carefully applying 2 coats. When I was done, the door looked beautiful. It was the nicest door on the entire street. I was proud of it. Mia said it looked like the door to a castle, and she started calling our house the castle for weeks afterward. Sarah said it made our home feel more welcoming. I agreed completely. For approximately 72 hours, we were happy about our door. Then Karen knocked. It was a Tuesday evening. Sarah was at work. Mia was doing homework at the kitchen table. I opened the beautiful blue door to find Karen standing on my porch with a folder clutched to her chest like it contained nuclear launch codes. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was doing. She looked at the door, then looked at me and said, "This is a violation." I asked her what she meant. She said the door color was not approved and that I needed to repaint it immediately. I asked her to show me the rule. She opened her folder and pulled out a document that was clearly the HOA guidelines, and she pointed to a section about maintaining neighborhood aesthetic harmony. I read the section. It said nothing about door colors. It talked about not letting your lawn die and not parking boats in your driveway and not installing satellite dishes without approval. There was no mention of doors. There was no list of approved colors. There was nothing that could possibly be interpreted as a rule against navy blue. I pointed this out to Karen. I said very politely that I didn't see any specific rule about door colors. She said the aesthetic harmony clause gave the board discretion to enforce color consistency. I asked her what color our door was supposed to be. She said approved beige. I asked her where I could find a list of approved colors. She said the board maintained that list internally. I asked if I could see the list. She said it wasn't available to residents. I asked how I was supposed to follow a rule I wasn't allowed to see. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something shift in her eyes. It was like watching a mask slip. The pleasant neighborhood busybody disappeared, and something colder took her place. She said, "Mr. Reynolds, the board has spoken. You have 30 days to comply or you will face fines. Have a good evening." And she walked away before I could respond. I want to be clear about something. I'm not by nature a confrontational person. I don't enjoy conflict. I generally try to get along with everyone because life is easier that way. But I also don't like being bullied. I don't like arbitrary rules that don't exist being used against me. And I definitely don't like being told I'm wrong when I'm holding the evidence that I'm right in my own hands. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I went to the next HOA board meeting. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the pool that smelled like chlorine and old carpet. There were about 20 residents there, plus the 5 board members, including Karen. I signed up to speak during the open comment period. When my turn came, I walked to the podium and explained the situation. I said I had received a violation notice about my door color. I said I had reviewed the HOA guidelines and found no rule about door colors. I asked the board to provide the specific rule I was allegedly violating or to dismiss the violation. Corinne's face went through about 17 different expressions during my 2-minute speech, none of them pleasant. When I finished, she leaned into her microphone and said, "Mr. Reynolds, the board appreciates your input, but enforcement decisions are made at the discretion of the board president. Your violation stands. Next speaker, please." I tried to respond, but she had already called someone else to the podium. I was dismissed, ignored, treated like a child who had spoken out of turn in class. I went home that night and told Sarah what happened. She was furious, not the loud, explosive kind of furious, the cold, quiet kind, the kind that nurses develop after years of dealing with difficult patients and incompetent administrators. She said we should fight it. She said we had done nothing wrong and we shouldn't have to repaint our door because one woman with a clipboard had decided she didn't like the color. I agreed. We decided to ignore the violation notice and see what happened. What happened was chaos. Within a week of that board meeting, I received another violation notice. This one claimed that our lawn was insufficiently maintained and cited brown patches near the sidewalk. Our lawn was green. The only brown patches were where a neighbor's dog regularly relieved itself, and that had been happening for years without comment. I took photographs and sent them to the board with a letter explaining that our lawn was in the same condition it had always been. The response I received said that my photographs were inconclusive and that the violation stood. The following week, I received another notice. This one said our trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. Our trash cans were in the side yard, behind a fence, completely invisible from any angle. I took more photographs. I sent more letters. I received the same dismissive response. Another week passed. Another notice. This one said our vehicle was leaking fluids in the driveway and creating an environmental hazard. My car was a 2-year-old Honda Accord that had never leaked anything in its entire existence. I had it inspected by a mechanic who provided a written statement that the vehicle was in perfect condition. I submitted the statement to the board. The response said the inspection was not conducted by a board-approved mechanic, and the violation stood. Do you see the pattern? Corinne was burying me in paperwork. She was manufacturing violations out of thin air. She was using her position to punish me for daring to question her at a public meeting. And every single violation came with a fine. $25 for the lawn, $50 for the trash cans, $100 for the alleged vehicle leak. The fines were adding up, and Corinne knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to bleed us dry. She was trying to make our lives so miserable that we would either repaint the door or move away entirely. But we did neither. We continued to fight. I started attending every board meeting. I started requesting copies of every document the HOA produced. I started reading the bylaws like they were scripture, looking for any ammunition I could use against Corinne's campaign of harassment. And I started talking to my neighbors. That's when I discovered something interesting. We were not Corinne's first victims. The Hendersons, who lived 3 streets over, had been through something similar 2 years earlier. Their crime was installing a flagpole in their front yard to fly an American flag. Corinne had declared the flagpole an unapproved structure and demanded its removal. The Hendersons had fought her for 6 months before eventually giving up and taking the flagpole down. They told me they had accumulated over $2,000 in fines before they surrendered. The Nuyens, who lived at the end of our street, had been targeted because their children's bicycles were sometimes visible in the open garage. Wren had sent them weekly notices about visible storage of recreational equipment until they started keeping the garage door closed at all times, even in the brutal Arizona summer. An elderly man named Mr. Kowalski had been harassed for 2 years because his wife liked to garden, and Corinne had decided that her flower choices were inconsistent with desert landscaping standards. Mrs. Kowalski had eventually stopped gardening. She told me she didn't have the energy to fight anymore. Her husband told me she cried about it sometimes because those flowers were her joy, and Karen had taken that joy away. Karen Mitchell had been terrorizing this community for years. She had driven at least 3 families to sell their homes and move away rather than continue dealing with her. She had made countless residents change their behavior, their hobbies, their lives to conform to her arbitrary demands. And nobody had ever successfully stood up to her because she was smart about it. She never did anything quite illegal enough to warrant a lawsuit. She never pushed quite hard enough to trigger a formal complaint. She stayed just on the edge of acceptable behavior, and she had the full weight of the HOA behind her. Until me, until my family, until the blue door. The fake allegations started about 3 months after the door incident. I was at the community mailboxes picking up a package when a neighbor I barely knew approached me. His name was Dave, and he lived on the other side of the community. We had maybe spoken twice in 3 years. He walked up to me with a strange look on his face and said, "Hey, I just wanted you to know, I don't believe what people are saying." I had no idea what he was talking about. I asked him to explain. He looked uncomfortable and said that Karen had been telling people that we had police incidents at our house, that there had been domestic disturbances, that we were potentially dangerous, and that other residents should be careful around us. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Police incidents, domestic disturbances. We had never even had a noise complaint. The police had never been to our home for any reason. We were the most boring family in the entire community. I asked Dave who Karen had told this to. He said she had mentioned it at a book club meeting and at a neighborhood watch gathering and in casual conversation at the community pool. She was spreading lies about my family to anyone who would listen. I went home and told Sarah. She sat very still for a long time, processing what I had told her. Then she asked me a question that broke my heart. She asked, "What if her co-workers find out? What if the hospital hears these rumors?" Sarah was a nurse. Her profession depended on her reputation for being stable, trustworthy, and competent. If rumors spread about domestic disturbances at her home, it could affect her career. It could affect her license. Karen wasn't just harassing us anymore. She was trying to destroy us. Over the next few weeks, we learned the full extent of Karen's smear campaign. She had told the security guard at the community gate that we were under investigation and that he should note any unusual activity at our address. She had told the board treasurer that we had anger issues and that he should be prepared for confrontation at meetings. She had told the woman who ran the community newsletter that we were lowering property values with our refusal to maintain community standards. She had told a group of mothers at the community playground that they should keep their children away from our house because we were unstable. That last one was the worst. Mia had so few friends. She was so shy. And now mothers were being told to keep their kids away from her house because her parents were unstable. I documented everything. I asked every neighbor who would talk to me to write down what they had heard and when they had heard it. I compiled a file of Karen's lies, and I contacted a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Jennifer, and she specialized in HOA disputes. When I told her my story, she sighed and said she heard variations of it at least once a month. She said HOA boards were breeding grounds for petty tyrants and that Karen's behavior, while despicable, was difficult to challenge legally. The fake allegations were a form of defamation, but proving damages would be expensive and time-consuming. The manufactured violations were probably not illegal, just unethical. The fines could be challenged through the HOA's internal appeals process, but that process was controlled by the same board that Karen led. Jennifer told me that the most effective strategy was usually to get Karen removed from the board. If we could rally enough residents to vote her out at the next annual meeting, we could end her reign without ever setting foot in a courtroom. The problem was that the annual meeting was 8 months away, and Karen knew she was vulnerable. She was going to do everything in her power to silence us before that meeting happened. The escalation continued. Karen started sending people to photograph our house at dawn. I would wake up at 6 in the morning to walk the dog and find a stranger standing on the sidewalk, camera pointed at our home, snapping pictures. When I asked what they were doing, they would say they were conducting a compliance inspection on behalf of the HOA and that I was not allowed to interfere. This happened 3 or 4 times a week. We started feeling like we were under surveillance, because we were. Karen started leaving notes on our door, not official violation notices, but handwritten notes on HOA letterhead. They said things like, "We know your home, and compliance is not optional, and the board is watching." The notes were never signed, but the handwriting was unmistakably Karen's. We compared it to documents she had signed at board meetings. It was her. She wanted us to know it was her. She wanted us to feel afraid. Mia started having nightmares. She would wake up crying about the mean lady coming to take her away. She started refusing to play in the front yard because she was scared someone would photograph her. She asked me one night if we were bad people, because why else would everyone be so mad at us? I held my daughter and told her we were not bad people. I told her we had done nothing wrong. I told her some people were just cruel and that we would get through this together. I told her everything was going to be okay. I prayed I wasn't lying. Sarah started having trouble sleeping during the day. Nurses who work nights depend on being able to sleep when the sun is up, but Karen's photographers started coming earlier and earlier. Sarah would be lying in bed at 7 a.m., exhausted from a 12-hour shift, and someone would be standing in front of our house taking pictures. Sometimes they would ring the doorbell, claiming they needed to verify occupancy. Sarah was a wreck. She was making mistakes at work because she was so tired. Her supervisor noticed and asked if everything was okay at home. Sarah had to explain the situation, had to worry about whether the rumors had reached the hospital, had to defend herself against allegations that didn't exist. Karen was destroying us from the inside out. The threats of forced removal started about a month before the door incident. I received an official letter from the HOA stating that due to our repeated violations and failure to comply with board directives, we were being placed on probationary status. The letter said that if we did not cure all outstanding violations within 30 days, the board would initiate proceedings to place a lien on our property. If we failed to pay the fines and costs associated with the lien, they could potentially force a sale of our home. They could take our house. Over a blue door and fake violations and manufactured garbage. I called Jennifer, my lawyer. She said the threat was mostly bluster. Actually forcing a sale over HOA fines was extremely difficult and rare, but the threat itself was designed to intimidate us. She said we should continue fighting, but that we should also prepare for Karen to do something drastic. Karen was losing. She knew the annual meeting was coming. She knew we had been talking to neighbors. She knew that her reign was in danger. And people like Karen, when they feel their power slipping away, they don't retreat. They attack. The night of the door theft was a Thursday. Sarah was working the overnight shift at the hospital. Mia had been having a hard week, struggling with a book report and worried about a substitute teacher she didn't like. I decided to take her out for dinner to cheer her up. We went to her favorite restaurant, a little Italian place about 20 minutes away. She had spaghetti with meatballs. I had lasagna. We split a piece of tiramisu for dessert. She told me about her day and showed me drawings she had made at school and slowly, gradually, relaxed into something like happiness. It was the most normal evening we had experienced in months. I was grateful for it. I had no idea what we were coming home to. We pulled into the driveway at approximately 9:45 in the evening. The porch light was on, which was normal. Sarah always left it on when she worked nights. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. The proportions of the house looked different somehow. There was too much dark space where there shouldn't be. And then I realized there was no door. The rectangular frame where our front door should have been was empty. I could see directly into our living room. The house was wide open. Anyone could have walked in. Anyone could be inside right now. For a moment, I was too shocked to move. This had to be a mistake. This had to be a dream. Doors don't just disappear. But this wasn't a dream, and doors do disappear when someone decides to take them. Mia was out of the car before I could stop her. She ran toward the house, then froze when she realized what she was looking at. The sound she made is something I will never forget. It was a wail, a cry of pure fear and confusion that came from somewhere deep inside her. She didn't understand. How could she understand? Her house was supposed to be safe. Her house was supposed to be where the bad things couldn't get her. And now the door was gone, and everything she believed about safety and security had been ripped away along with it. I caught her before she could run inside. I held her against my chest and felt her entire body shaking with sobs. I told her to stay right there, to not move, to wait for Daddy. And then I walked toward my violated home. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. I had no weapon. I had no plan. I had no idea if someone was inside waiting for me. But I couldn't let my daughter see me hesitate. I couldn't let her see me be afraid. So I walked through the empty doorframe and into my living room, every muscle tensed, every nerve screaming at me to run. The lights were off. The house was silent. I moved from room to room, turning on lights, checking closets, looking under beds. No one was there. Whoever had taken our door had done their work and left. The house was empty except for us. That's when I noticed the note. It was taped to the wall in the entryway, right where our family photos usually hung. Someone had moved the photos to make room for it. The note was on HOA letterhead, handwritten in the same script I had come to recognize over months of harassment. It said, "Temporary removal due to HOA door color violation. You were notified. Door will be returned after compliance." And at the bottom, in a neat flourish, were the initials KM Karen Mitchell. I read the note 3 times. I read it until the words stopped making sense. I read it until I was sure I wasn't imagining it. Karen had hired someone to come to my home while I was at dinner with my daughter and physically remove our front door. She had broken into our property. She had exposed our home to anyone who walked past. She had terrorized my child, and she had done it over a paint color that wasn't even against any written rule. She had finally crossed the line from harassment into outright criminality, and she had signed her name to the evidence. I brought Mia inside and closed the curtains over the empty doorframe as best I could. I sat her on the couch with a blanket and put on her favorite movie and told her everything was going to be okay. Then I went into the kitchen and called the police. The dispatcher seemed confused when I explained the situation. "Someone stole your door?" she asked, like she had misheard me. I said yes. Someone hired by the HOA president had removed our front door without permission. The dispatcher said an officer would be there within the hour. Then I called Sarah. Calling a nurse in the middle of her shift is not something you do lightly. When she answered, her voice was tense. "Ryan, what's wrong?" I told her about the door. I told her about the note. I told her that Mia was okay but scared. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then Sarah said very quietly, "I'm coming home." I told her she didn't have to leave work, that I had it under control. She said, "My daughter is scared, and my home was violated. I'm coming home." She hung up before I could argue. While I waited for the police and Sarah, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I went to confront Karen. I know it was stupid. I know I should have waited for the authorities. But you have to understand the rage that was burning through me. This woman had spent months trying to destroy my family. She had spread lies about us. She had manufactured violations against us. She had tried to take our home. And now she had crossed into actual criminal behavior, and my daughter was sitting on the couch with tears drying on her face, and I could not let this moment pass without looking Karen in the eye. So I walked. Her house was only a few blocks away. It was a warm evening, and I covered the distance quickly, my fists clenched at my sides. When I got to her house, every light was on. I could see movement through the windows. She was awake. She was home. She knew exactly what she had done. I knocked on the door. Actually, knocked is generous. I pounded. I hit that door with the side of my fist hard enough to rattle the frame. After a long moment, the door opened, and there stood Karen Mitchell. She was wearing a silk bathrobe. She had a glass of white wine in her hand, and she was smiling. That smile is seared into my memory. It was the smile of someone who believed they had won. It was the smile of someone who thought they were untouchable. She looked at me and said, "Mr. Reynolds." What a surprise. Is something wrong? I asked her if she had sent someone to remove my front door. She didn't deny it. She didn't even hesitate. She took a sip of her wine and said, "The board authorized a compliance action. Your door was in violation. It was removed pending your compliance with community standards. Once you repaint the door to an approved color, it will be returned." I told her she had no right. I told her what she did was illegal. I told her that she had broken into my property and terrorized my child. She shrugged, actually shrugged, like I was telling her about a minor inconvenience. Then she said something I will never forget. "Maybe now you'll take HOA rules seriously." I could feel my vision narrowing. I could feel my hands shaking. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she understood what she had done. But I didn't. I don't know where I found the self-control, but I didn't touch her. Instead, I said, very slowly and very clearly, that what she had done was criminal, that I was going to press charges, that she was going to pay for every moment of fear she had caused my daughter. And Karen, still smiling that infuriating smile, said, "Then prove it." She stepped back and closed the door in my face. I walked home in a daze. The police were already there when I arrived. An officer was talking to Mia, who had calmed down slightly but still looked like a ghost. Another officer was photographing the empty doorframe and the note on the wall. Sarah arrived about 10 minutes later, still in her scrubs, her face a mask of barely contained fury. We spent the next 2 hours giving statements and answering questions and documenting everything we could. The officer said they would investigate, but he warned us that HOA disputes often fell into a legal grey area. Karen would probably claim she had board authority to remove the door. It would be our word against hers about whether she had that authority. I showed the officer months of evidence. The manufactured violations, the fake allegations, the harassment campaign. He took notes, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He had seen neighborhood disputes before. He probably thought we were exaggerating. Sarah and I stayed up all night. We couldn't sleep. We had no door. We pushed a heavy bookcase in front of the opening and took turns watching the entrance while the other rested. We talked about leaving. We talked about just selling the house and walking away from the whole nightmare. But we had already put 3 years of our lives into this community. Mia was established in her school. Sarah's commute to the hospital was perfect. And more than anything, we didn't want to let Karen win. We didn't want to become another family that she had driven away. We decided to stay and fight. The next morning, Karen escalated again. I found a new violation notice on what remained of our doorframe. It cited us for creating a public nuisance by having an unsecured entrance. Let me make sure you understand this. She removed our door, and then she cited us for not having a door. The violation carried a fine of $500 per day until the entrance was properly secured with an approved door of appropriate color. She was trying to bury us in fines for a situation she had created. The cruelty was almost impressive in its audacity. But Karen wasn't done. That same day, she filed a formal complaint with the HOA board claiming that I had threatened the contractor who removed our door. She claimed I had verbally assaulted her on her front porch. She claimed that my behavior was aggressive, unstable, and threatening to the peace of the community. She sent a letter to all board members warning them that I might become violent at the next meeting and that security measures should be considered. She left another handwritten note on our house, this one warning that our behavior could result in accelerated enforcement actions, including forced removal from the community. She was building a paper trail. She was painting us as the aggressors. She was setting the stage to claim that everything she had done was justified self-defense against a dangerous family. I contacted Jennifer, my lawyer, and told her what had happened. For the first time, I heard genuine excitement in her voice. She said, "She removed your door. She actually physically removed your door from your property." I confirmed that she had. Jennifer said, "Ryan, that's not a grey area. That's breaking and entering. That's illegal entry. That's destruction of property. That's a crime. She handed you a lawsuit on a silver platter." For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Karen had made a mistake. In her arrogance, in her certainty that she was untouchable, she had done something that could not be explained away as a misunderstanding or a matter of interpretation. She had committed a clear and obvious crime. But we needed proof. The note with Karen's initials was helpful, but she could claim it was forged. The police report was helpful, but it didn't definitively prove who was responsible. We needed someone who would confirm that Karen had ordered the door removal. And that's when something unexpected happened. The contractor called me. His name was Marcus, and he sounded terrified on the phone. He said Karen had hired him through her nephew, who owed her a favor. She had told him that the door was illegal and that the HOA had full authority to remove it. She had insisted it be done while we were away from home. She had assured him that there would be no legal issues and that this was standard HOA procedure. Marcus said he had been uncomfortable the entire time, But Karen was a family friend, and he didn't want to cause problems. But now the police were asking questions, and he realized that he might have been tricked into participating in a crime. He wanted to know if there was a way to make this right. I asked him if he would be willing to put what he had told me in writing. There was a long pause. Then Marcus said, "If she lied to me about having authority, then she used me. I have a license to protect. I have a business to protect. I'm not going down for her." He agreed to write a statement. He agreed to tell the truth. And just like that, we had our proof. Marcus wrote a detailed statement describing exactly what Karen had told him. She had said the door was illegally installed. She had said the HOA board had unanimously authorized its removal. She had said the homeowners had been warned multiple times and had refused to comply with legal orders. She had said there was no risk of legal problems because the HOA had full authority over the property. Every single one of these statements was a lie. The door was not illegally installed. The board had not authorized its removal. We had complied with every actual legal order. And the HOA absolutely did not have the authority to break into our home and take our door. Karen had lied to Marcus to get him to do her dirty work. And now Marcus was telling the truth. Marcus didn't just give the statement to us. He also gave a copy to another board member, a man named David Chen, who had been on the board for years, but had always seemed uncomfortable with Karen's tactics. David was a quiet man, a retired accountant who had joined the board because he believed in community service. He had never openly opposed Karen, but he had also never fully supported her crusade against us. When David read Marcus's statement, something changed. He called an emergency board meeting for the following evening. He didn't tell Karen why. The emergency meeting was held in the community clubhouse. All 5 board members were there. About 40 residents showed up, which was the largest attendance anyone could remember. Word had spread that something significant was happening. I was there with Sarah. Jennifer, my lawyer, was there to observe but not participate. And Karen was there, looking supremely confident, probably assuming this meeting was another opportunity to denounce us publicly. David Chen called the meeting to order. He looked nervous. His hands were shaking as he shuffled papers, but his voice was steady when he spoke. He said that new information had come to light regarding the recent enforcement action at our address. He said that a contractor had provided a sworn statement about the circumstances of that action. He said the statement raised serious legal and ethical concerns about the conduct of the board president. And then he read Marcus's statement out loud. I watched Karen's face as the statement was read. I watched the confidence drain away. I watched the smile disappear. I watched her realize that she had been caught, that her contractor had betrayed her, that everything she had done was now on the record, in writing, in front of the entire community. By the time David finished reading, Karen was pale. She tried to speak, to object, to explain. But David held up his hand and said that the board would hear her response after all relevant information had been presented. And there was more relevant information. David produced copies of the manufactured violations Karen had sent us over the past months. He showed documents proving that no rule existed about door colors. He read testimony from neighbors who had been told we were dangerous and had police incidents. He summarized the pattern of harassment we had endured. And he presented a legal opinion from the HOA's own attorney stating that removing a homeowner's door without a court order was illegal forced entry, and that the HOA could face significant liability for the action. When David finished, he asked Karen if she would like to respond. She stood up. She looked around the room at the faces staring back at her, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She had built her entire identity around being the guardian of this community, the enforcer of its standards, the protector of its property values. And now everyone was seeing her for what she really was, a bully who had gone too far. Karen tried to defend herself. She said she had been trying to protect the community. She said we had been defiant and disrespectful. She said the door color was clearly inappropriate and that someone had to maintain standards. She said she had believed she had the authority to take the action she took, but her words fell flat. Nobody was buying it anymore. When she tried to claim that we had made threats against her. 3 neighbors stood up and said they had witnessed my conversation with her on her porch, and I had never raised my voice. When she tried to claim the door color was against the rules, David pulled out the HOA guidelines and challenged her to show him the rule. She couldn't. When she tried to claim the board had approved her action, the other 4 board members looked at each other in confusion. None of them had approved anything. The vote was swift. All 4 remaining board members voted to strip Karen of all enforcement powers immediately. They voted to dismiss every fine and violation she had issued to us. They voted to schedule a community-wide vote on her removal from the board at the next monthly meeting. They voted to report her actions to the city for investigation of unlawful property interference. And they voted to require her to personally pay for the replacement of our door, installed by a licensed contractor at her expense, in the color of our choice. Karen sat through the votes in stunned silence. When the final motion passed, she stood up, gathered her things, and walked out of the meeting without saying a word. She didn't slam the door. She didn't make a dramatic exit. She just left, and somehow that quiet departure was more satisfying than any explosion could have been. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks. The community vote to remove Karen from the board was almost unanimous. Only 2 residents voted to keep her, and everyone suspected they were her relatives. She was officially removed from the board and barred from holding any HOA position for a minimum of 5 years. The city investigated her actions and issued a citation for illegal entry, though she avoided criminal charges by claiming she had genuinely believed she had authority to remove the door. The contractor, Marcus, was also cited but avoided serious consequences because he cooperated fully with the investigation. And Karen was forced to pay for our new door, which we painted the same beautiful navy blue as the original. The legal fallout continued for months. Jennifer filed a civil lawsuit against Karen personally for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Karen initially tried to fight it, claiming we had no damages, but Jennifer was able to document the nights of lost sleep, the therapy sessions for Mia's anxiety, the medical visits for Sarah's stress-related health issues, and the countless hours I had spent fighting manufactured violations instead of working. Karen's lawyer eventually recommended settlement. We accepted. The amount was confidential, but it was enough to cover all of our legal fees, all of our medical expenses, and a nice contribution to Mia's college fund. But the money wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was watching our neighbors apologize. What mattered was hearing people say they were sorry for believing Karen's lies. What mattered was watching Mia slowly regain her confidence, knowing that the mean lady couldn't hurt us anymore. What mattered was seeing Sarah finally get a full night's sleep during the day without photographers at our window or violation notices on our door. What mattered was looking at our beautiful blue door and knowing that we had won. The neighborhood is different now. The new board president is David Chen, the quiet accountant who had the courage to call the emergency meeting. He's been fantastic. Under his leadership, the board has reviewed and clarified every rule in the guidelines. There are no more discretionary enforcement powers for the president. Every violation must cite a specific written rule. Every fine can be appealed to the full board. And door colors. There's now a published list of approved colors, and it includes every shade of blue you can imagine. The Henderson family put up their flagpole again. The Nguyen kids' bicycles sit proudly in their open garage. And Mrs. Kowalski is gardening again, her flowers more beautiful than ever. Karen still lives in the community. We see her sometimes, driving past in her white SUV or picking up mail at the community boxes. She doesn't look at us anymore. She doesn't look at anyone. She keeps her head down and her eyes averted. The woman who once commanded this neighborhood through fear and arbitrary rules now walks through it like a ghost. I don't feel sorry for her. I can't feel sorry for her after what she put my family through, but I don't gloat either. I just go about my life. I mow my lawn and wave to my neighbors and watch my daughter ride her bike in the front yard without fear. That's victory enough. Mia is 12 now. She's still shy, but she's getting better. She has 6 friends instead of 3. She joined the school art club and has started entering competitions. Last month, she won 2nd place in a regional contest for young artists. The piece that won was a painting of a house with a beautiful blue door. She called it home. I cried when I saw it. Sarah cried too. Our little girl had taken the worst experience of her life and turned it into something beautiful. That's the kind of person she is. That's the kind of person we're raising. Sarah is still working nights. She still comes home exhausted at 7 in the morning. But now she sleeps peacefully, without interruption, without fear. Her supervisor at the hospital gave her a commendation last year for her work with difficult patients. She handled a crisis in the emergency room with a combative patient, and her colleagues said she was remarkably calm under pressure. When I asked her about it, she laughed and said, "After Karen, nothing seems that scary." I'm still working from home. I'm still writing code and joining video calls and living a boring, wonderful existence. But I'm also more involved in the community now. I joined the HOA board last year, taking one of the seats that opened up when Karen's allies resigned. I use my position to advocate for fairness and transparency. I make sure that no one ever has to go through what we went through. And when new families move into the neighborhood, I introduce myself and make sure they know that this is a good place to live. Because it is, now. It's the community we always believed it could be. The door is still blue. Sometimes I stand on the porch and just look at it. It's just a door. A wooden rectangle designed to keep weather out and privacy in. But to me, it's a symbol. It's proof that you don't have to let bullies win. It's proof that one family can make a difference. It's proof that even when someone tries to tear down everything you've built, you can build it back stronger. Mia asked me once, about a year after everything happened, why Karen did what she did. Why she hated us so much over a paint color. I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. Maybe Karen needed to feel powerful. Maybe she needed to feel important. Maybe she had problems in her own life, and taking control of ours made her feel better. Maybe she was just a broken person who never learned how to treat others with respect. I told Mia that sometimes people do cruel things, and it's not because of anything we did wrong. It's because of something broken inside them. And our job is not to become broken too. Our job is to stay who we are and to keep doing the right thing even when it's hard. Mia thought about that for a while. Then she said, "I think that's what the blue door means, Daddy. It means we didn't change." I hugged her and told her she was exactly right. If you're dealing with an HOA bully right now, I want you to know that you're not alone. Thousands of families across this country are going through something similar. There are forums and support groups and lawyers who specialize in exactly this kind of fight. Document everything. Save every email, every notice, every photo. Talk to your neighbors. Build alliances. Attend meetings. Make your voice heard. And most importantly, don't give up. Bullies like Karen depend on their victims becoming exhausted and surrendering. They count on being the most persistent person in the fight. But you can be more persistent. You can outlast them. You can fight back. I'm not saying it's easy. There were nights during the worst of it when I wanted to quit. There were moments when the weight of the harassment felt like too much to bear. But I kept going. We kept going. Because we knew that if we gave up, Karen would just find another target, another family to harass, another child to scare, another home to violate. By standing up to her, we didn't just save ourselves. We saved everyone who would have come after us. That night when Mia whispered, "Daddy, will she ever come take our door again?" broke something inside me. No child should have to ask that question. No child should have to fear that their home isn't safe because a neighbor with a clipboard decided their family was an enemy. That question is what kept me fighting when I wanted to surrender. That question is what gave me the strength to see this through to the end. And now I can answer it. No, sweetheart, she will never take our door again. Because we stopped her, because we stood up to her, because we refused to let her win. HOA power isn't the problem. Homeowners associations serve a legitimate purpose. They maintain common areas. They enforce reasonable rules that protect property values. They organize community events and resolve disputes between neighbors. In the right hands, an HOA can make a neighborhood a better place to live. But in the wrong hands, an HOA becomes a weapon. And people like Karen are always looking for weapons. The solution isn't to abolish HOAs. The solution is to stay involved. Attend meetings, read the rules, know your rights, vote in elections, run for the board if you can. The only way to prevent bullies from seizing power is to make sure good people are there to stop them. I know not everyone has the time or energy for that level of involvement. Life is busy. Work is demanding. Kids need attention. But even a little bit of engagement is better than none. Even showing up once a year to vote can make a difference. And if you ever find yourself on the receiving end of harassment from an HOA president or board member, remember this. They are not as powerful as they think they are. Their authority has limits. The law is on your side. And there are people who will help you if you ask. Don't suffer in silence. Don't let them convince you that fighting back is hopeless. And definitely don't give up your beautiful blue door. This story has been shared thousands of times since I first told it. People from across the country have reached out to tell me their own stories. Some of them were worse than mine. Some of them made my door theft look like a minor inconvenience. But all of them had the same theme: ordinary families being terrorized by petty tyrants who abused their positions of power. And many of those stories had the same ending as mine. The bully lost, the family won, and the community became a better place. I tell this story not because I want sympathy, but because I want to help. If even one family reads this and finds the courage to fight back against their own Karen, then reliving this nightmare was worth it. If even one community looks at what happened here and decides to implement better safeguards against abuse, then our suffering meant something. And if even one person who is currently being harassed by an HOA bully reads this and realizes they are not alone, then I've done what I set out to do. Thank you for reading. Thank you for caring. And thank you for remembering that behind every viral HOA horror story, there's a real family. Real parents who just want to raise their children in peace. Real kids who just want to feel safe in their own homes. Real people who made the mistake of painting their door a beautiful shade of blue and found themselves at war with a petty tyrant. We won our war, and if you're fighting one now, I hope you win yours too. Keep fighting, keep documenting, keep speaking up, and never, ever let them take your door.